Hey, babies. Hey, babies and babies and babies and babies. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Big Monday for this guy. I love all of it. I love 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 it.
Out
What a
of
day.
out of nowhere, too.
Out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. I feel for the people whose jobs are based on breaking news. That's not my job any longer. I had that. It was a long time ago now, but I had that job. I did not like that part of the job. I'm glad that I transitioned into I don't feel the pressure to break any news here. I react to the news here. I'll tell you if I know something, but in general, I like sitting back. I feel for those people trying to cover this team now because they don't give up the goods on anything. I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, really for months. Whatever you hear about them, this group doesn't talk to anybody. So good luck getting accurate information. We're all just guessing here a little bit and surmising, looking at the roster going, this is what they need to do. But I did not see landing one of the best tackles in a trade on day one of free agency as a possible outcome because, and I think the people in Houston probably didn't know this, I don't think they knew he was available. So good on Adam Peters and company on addressing a massive, massive need for this team. Offensive line, edge rush, those are the spots that really needed to be addressed badly. There are other holes. We'll get to all of them. But those are the two spots where things have to happen here this offseason if they are going to improve and try to replicate or do better than what they did a year ago. And this one came literally out of nowhere. It was awesome.
And especially in an offseason where it seemed like if you were a name that had any interest in even getting a new contract or being traded, you were thrown out there. You were given permission to seek a trade. Look at how many players were on the block or then that got cut, like John Allen. And we'll get to him in a minute. But this is one no one knew was even available. So did Peters call them up and blow them away? And you didn't talk about the picks. They gave up a lot of picks, but they still have their first and second this year. Yeah. I mean, once again, I know he wants to build through the draft. I'm team build through the draft too. But hey, if you're going to trade the picks and you still keep your first and your second, I can't complain about that, let alone you get a franchise left tackle for at least 2 years. Hopefully, things work out and they have him for longer. But yeah, slam dunk, grand slam, whatever you want to call it, out of nowhere, this was fantastic yesterday.
So they're giving up their 3 this year and one of the 2 7s that they had this year. Next year, they're giving up their 2nd and their 4th round pick. They get back a 4th round pick this year. So let's just call that a wash for this year. So they're giving up really a 2nd and a 3rd, really, and a 7th, I suppose. 2nd, 3rd, 7th is really what the deal is, because we could wash out the other. I'm doing that every day of the week, especially with, I think it's been underrated that this has been necessary. That Cosme injury, I think really, really pushed them to have to do something to fortify the line while he recovers, because I don't know what the timeline is yet. I'll be interested to hear from Dan Quinn on what he thinks the timeline. That injury happened in the playoffs, so it is possible that he's going to be out until bare minimum the beginning part of camp, the beginning part of the season. He may miss time. He may not play this year. I don't know yet for this season. They had to do something. And I felt this way for a while. Not like the way when Cosme started his career at tackle. I kept looking at him going, he's a really good player. They just got to find his spot. And they have. And he's turned into one of the best guards. Brandon Coleman was the same thing a year ago. After watching him for a whole year, I went, this guy's a keeper. He's a starter. The question is, where is he going to be utilized? And I'll be very interested to see what they do with him now. Do they move him to guard, or do they move him to right tackle? A lot of people expected, because you can get cap relief by releasing Andrew Wiley. They didn't do that. So he's still on this team. Cornelius Lucas just left, by the way, signed with Cleveland. Andrew Wiley is still on the team. So if he's the right tackle, that means they're moving Coleman to guard, whether that's, I would assume, left guard next to Tunsil, move Allegretti to right guard until Cosme comes back. That's what I think is going to happen, but I don't know until I hear from them, or whether they think he can move to right tackle, which I think is viable as well. But I think it's beyond the right thing to do, and it is a group that needs to be fortified big time And this one amongst the shockers around the NFL, because when that one landed, there was a lot of double takes everywhere I was watching when that happened.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Coleman should kick over to left guard, mainly just to settle that side, right? You're not having him pop to right, then pop inside or whatever. You keep him next to Tunsil. You keep that left side ready to go. And then with Allegretti filling in for Cosme, hopefully, Cosme will slot right back in. And then you just put your best 5 out there at that point. But I'm team put him at left guard. I still will just say, though, like, I kind of can't believe the Texans even gave up this guy. I know they need some salary cap relief. I don't know if this was the guy I would have cut from or the unit I would have cut from where Stroud was running for his life last year. So, I mean, just all of this factoring in, it's still really shocking to me a day later because of all of the implications that it comes with it. And the fact that this team, this was the number one need next to edge rusher. They end up, basically nailing a trade for it and still keeping their first and second round picks.
I also don't think this takes offensive line off for them. That let's see how the draft plays out. If they don't trade back, I mean, there's more and more with giving up the picks, screams that they could trade out at 29 and get some of the picks back, because there seems to be a glut of talent in the second and third round, and the delineation between that talent level seems not that high. So let's see what they do, but you have to have a partner for that. Someone's got to want to trade for 29 and move you back into the second round. So we'll have to see if that actually happens. Even if it does, either way, I don't think this takes offensive line off the board for them. That they could end up selecting their right tackle in the draft with either the first or the second round pick. That wouldn't surprise me. So I think that this unit needed to get better, significant. I think they did that overnight by making this deal. So I was shocked when I saw that, because this is one of those names that was not out there at all. To your point, every big name that was being dangled was out there. And it was like we finally reached a transparent offseason where everybody went, okay, if you want to go pursue a trade, go ahead, pursue a trade. John Allen, Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Myles Garrett to a degree, Trey Hendrickson. All these players are just kind of dangling out there, and teams are going, you know what, we'll release you early. Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers. And it's like, okay, go ahead. It was like the first time we didn't have all the subterfuge that goes along with an offseason, and there this one was lurking in the corners. And I want to hear from Houston as to why they did this, because typically teams don't give up on players like this. So there is a tiny bit of pause, but I do know that they had to upgrade this position. Ronnie Stanley was off the board. I'd rather have this guy than Ronnie Stanley. We've talked about this for weeks. There is not a lot of great options in the free agency market, especially at the spots that they needed. There are some edge rush, but you had to pay a premium to get someone like Josh Sweat. There wasn't really good tackles that I thought you would spend this kind of money on. So they had to find a workaround, and man, did they find it. This is a home run. Unless there's something that we just don't know about him physically, this is a home run, honestly.
The only thing I saw from Houston fans off of this trade was that apparently he has a lot of false starts, and he had a ton of false starts last season.
I don't care about that.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, that's one thing that we'll
this
cross.
Guy's been in the Pro Bowl 5 years running. He's been among the best. He had a bad year with false starts. If that's what it is, I don't care about that.
Yeah, like I said, once again, they didn't give up their first or their second round pick this year. I'm okay with taking a swing on this guy. He's been great everywhere he's been. And look, with Houston, from what I read and what I gather, it's because they have salary cap issues and they want to basically clear the deck for Stroud or whoever in the next couple of years. And this was a part of that. That seems to be it. That's all I can gather from this one. The other thing is, I don't think you should discount Adam Peters just making a deal here either. He might have called them up and said, hey, this guy's got 2 years left on his deal. We need a left tackle. What's it going to take to pry? And they might have just started having a back and forth too. Maybe he wasn't really on the block and Peters just made the call. I don't rule that out with the way that he has worked and the way that the business side has worked. As you said too, it's Fort Knox over there. No one says anything. Yeah. So he might have even told them, if you let this get out, our deal is dead too. So that might have also been the case here as well, where I think maybe Peters just made a deal and they finally settled on a price. And like I said, the fact they still did not give up their first or second is a miracle to me this season. A
complete miracle to me. I would love to see them move back and acquire more picks.
Yep.
But it takes It now takes a partner to do that. We would need someone like Shedeur Sanders to be at the bottom of the first round, which I doubt would happen. And then someone goes, all right, now it's worth moving up to try to get him. Or maybe it's Jackson Dart, or maybe it's this guy from Louisville. Those are the type of players where I could see it. Like if the receiver Matthew Golden is there at 29, I'm not sure Washington would trade out of that. They might take someone like that because the talent level might be a little too high. This opens them up in the draft. They had to do something at edge, or in my opinion, at the offensive line in free agency to free them up for the draft to go after positional players of need. I've felt this way for a while. There's just too many holes to fill them all in one offseason, but they're doing a bang-up job getting some major upgrades to try to at least mask over those holes. Deebo Samuel is an explosive player that's going to add to their offense. They still need more receivers. Like, that's not done yet. Laremy Tunsil is a massive upgrade from where they are. I would still argue they need more depth, or maybe one more starter with Cosme out on the offensive line. It's not done yet. They haven't addressed edge rush. They did find John Allen's replacement. They did that yesterday too. Their first signing was Javon Kinlaw, who's a former first-round pick in San Francisco, drafted by Adam Peters. People seem to balk at the contract numbers that he was given. 3 years, $45 million, 30 of it guaranteed. So $10 million guaranteed per year over 3 years. And I'm sitting there going, like, when I saw everybody react to the contract numbers, I'm going, did you see what Milton Williams just got? Like, he's got $26 million a year. Osa Odigizua got over $20 million a year. John Allen, who I'll get to in a minute, just got another deal that's valued over $20 million a year. Like, this is a $15 million a year contract. Are you real? Would you think you were going to get somebody like that for, and you don't think that that's a good price? Because I, respectfully disagree with every person who said, oh, the problem I have with it's the price. Well, they're not paying him what the Patriots just paid Milton Williams. Like, what are you talking about?
It's also, he's like, it's not a lock that he's going to be the every down player either. Like, he's going to rotate with Johnny Newton and Daron Payne. Like, this is going to be a rotation is what I'm getting at here. Like, they've got 3 guys that can play right now on that line. I thought this was fine. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not like pumped about it or anything, but at the same time, I didn't see a need to like poo-poo this deal at all. Like, 3 years, $30 million. I'm fine with it. They basically cut the John Allen deal in half is really what I looked at it as. And yes, what we saw from John Allen was he had a couple of plays where he was dominant, but at the same time, there was a lot to be desired with John's play here. And I think this was just a cost-cutting move. They cut their defensive tackle, price in half. I was fine with it. I don't have any like one inkling or the other, really, honestly.
I mean, I'll tell you what I know about him so far. And I'm not going to do a total sales job here, but I'll tell you what I know about him so far. He's a freakish athlete, right? So he's like 6'4", 320, can really move. When you see him, you're going to be like, oh my God, he's a monster. But so he kind of rises up and gets to South Carolina after a very circuitous route. And there is actually a very interesting background with him. He lived here as a kid for a short period of time and went through, I don't think it was sustained, but periodic homelessness here, living in D.C. There are stories about him riding the metro all day because they wanted to stay warm, like stuff like that. So I don't know how much he's going to want to talk about that stuff, but there are some background stories like him. So he does have a history of being in this area, a very circuitous route through like almost like a foster family in Mississippi where he ends up, and eventually, like his talent took over. He's such a, tremendous athlete. He ended up getting to South Carolina. He had a dominant season. He ended up being a first-round pick. His first few years at San Francisco, riddled by injuries. He just missed a bazillion games. They basically he started having run-ins with some of the media. They started calling him a bust. He ends up going to the Jets last year. I don't want to sit here and pretend like he had some incredible season, but he was healthy over the last couple of years. He had 4.5, 5 sacks from an interior defensive line position. That said, that's a really good defensive group that he was working with. So like, I don't want to, throw that all on him. That's also not like a big gaudy number, but he is a defensive tackle. There's one Jalen Carter, there's one Aaron Donald. There's most everyone else doesn't have numbers like that. We had a couple of years with John and Daron that had numbers. They were huge, but like it's rare one-offs when they're at that position. But the freakish talent stuff started to come around. I think the being in the league for a number of years and having a strange route back to a familiar place, Adam Peters, is going to be helpful for him. And I will say this, like, I don't look at this and go, oh, everything's fixed there. And I want to be fair, like, they honestly, like, they made the hole by releasing John. They had to replace him. They had to get somebody. The price point that they paid for him, I couldn't believe the backlash to it, because I was like, what, like, wait till you see what Milton Williams gets. Or, like, didn't you just see what Odigizua got? Like, they're paying him like 25 to 50% less than those guys. You think those guys are that much better than him? Like, I don't know what you guys are watching. Like, the price point I had absolutely no issue with. I think the price point actually matches where he is. He's a starter. He could play. When healthy, he'll make some plays. He's going to be a problem because of his athletic gifts. He just hasn't been a playmaker. That's all. There just hasn't been a lot of big outcomes for him. But I'd describe it kind of like, it's possible that they're getting a steady player like Dorrance Armstrong a year ago, where I wouldn't expect big numbers, but he's going to be a problem and he's going to be a hole filler for them. And then I'm waiting to see what they do. I'm still assuming that they're going to get some edge rush help, whether that's on the open market or via the draft. Like, it's screaming in the draft that if like one of these edge rushers is available to them at the end of the first round, they would probably take that. Or there are options still on the open market. It's not Josh Sweat or people like that, but there are options on the open market where they could look at it. But there is a possibility, because they started doing this a year ago. Deron Payne has moved to the outside at times. Kinlaw, I don't think, is a traditional nose tackle. He could slide out a little bit. Johnny Newton, his best play was not necessarily in the interior line that could move him around. I can't remember. I can't believe I don't remember this, but they had a package with John Duran and Newton together that they called like the Viper package or something like that. I don't know that they don't run that stuff out there a little bit more, that their 4 defensive linemen are really 4 defensive tackles. Well, 3 of them, you don't count Armstrong, 3 of them, and one of them becomes a hybrid player. I still think they're going to go get an edge rusher, but I'm not sure. I think this is an interesting position that Quinn is going to be in. I want to see how they position this. Do they look at him as a traditional defensive tackle, or do they see some flexibility with him, Newton, and Payne, where they can kind of rotate them around, where at times one, if not all of them, are playing on the, quote unquote, outside of the line?
How'd you get through that whole thing without saying position flex? Come on, man. That's the magic words.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to start drinking. It's too early in the day.
That was the buzzword 2 years ago. On Kinlaw too, I couldn't help but feel this yesterday, just looking at social media, that this fan base is still so traumatized that they saw all these moves happening and then we weren't making any moves. And then the Kinlaw deal came through at 12, 1 o'clock, whatever time it was. And everyone kind of was like, oh, that's it. And everyone freaked out because it was like, that was the deal that came through. And then, of course, the Tunsil trade came in later. But I couldn't help but feel a little bit like, guys, this whole entire group last year basically made nothing but wave 2 signings. And every single one worked out for them. Everybody just needs to relax. Calm down. This is going to be a player, as you said, too, he's probably going to rotate in more than anything else. If he does start, great. I still expect the snaps to be very evenly divided between him, Payne, and Johnny Newton, and probably a veteran that comes in too. And so, yeah, I just couldn't believe there was as much of a negative reaction off of all of the moves they made last year. Everyone started freaking out a little bit yesterday until the Tunsil trade happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it wasn't going to be the only thing they did.
Right.
And again, I want to reiterate, they created a hole here by releasing John. Yeah. So I don't know why people were surprised that they didn't have his replacement lined up. They had to go get a replacement here because we know they need an edge rusher. We knew they needed offensive line help. We know they need wide receivers. They could use another safety now. Now they could use another corner. There's only so many things you could do in the draft. They just added defensive tackle to the list by releasing John. They had to replace it. Clearly the John move, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but this is happening around the league. There's no way Seattle trades Geno Smith unless they know they're getting Sam Darnold. Come on.
Sure.
You don't make that move. You do not do that unless you know on the other side you're going to do something like this. In the same way, like, I think the Commanders felt comfortable releasing John Allen, knowing that they were going to get a cheaper alternative that maybe they get the same production out of it. I want to be respectful to John. Maybe. This guy hasn't had a season like John, not one. John had a number of them, not the last couple of years, but so I want to be fair to him. But I think they're looking at him as a cheaper alternative with an athletic upside. You haven't seen his best yet. I mean, that's what they're going to sell you. He's been hurt a lot. He shifted around to the Jets. That was a weird season. He comes here. We know him. Trust us. We know his talent level. He's a former first-round pick for a reason. We're going to get the most out of him, and it's going to look like a deal, and we're going to hopefully see that. That said, either way, if he's a good starter that helps their run defense, Frank, at the price point that's different than John's, then they've got the same production for a lot less money, and you need to see it that way. Like, not every swing that every team's going to take is going to be a home run. Everyone like looks at these things. Oh, they brought this guy in. They're going to be amazing. Well, call me in 8 months when only a few teams are in the playoffs and you're wondering why that guy didn't fit for your team. This is one of those. They're taking a swing. I think the price point was right. I don't think it's wrong. I actually think it's right. It is at 15 per year when the top tier defensive tackles are making 20 to 26. Well, they're not paying him like one of those guys. So let's see how it plays out. And I do think, and I want to hear from them, I do think they're going to get edge rush help, but I do think that they're looking at this a little differently, that they could have what is traditionally a defensive tackle play a little more end, whether that's Newton, Payne, or him this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I joked last answer, position flex seems to be what is going to have to try to get them through with this defensive line, because you're not going to figure it all out in one run, essentially.
No, you're not. And I just want to say this too, like the bullseye of who they need to beat is right in front of them. It's in their division.
Yep.
They just signed Saquon Barkley to a big deal. Lane Johnson has already said he's coming back. They like winning. Their offensive line ain't going anywhere. They're all under contract. They're all really good. You've got to beat them. If you want to get anywhere, you have to beat them. So they need to make their defensive line better.
Yep.
They do. They need to make their defensive line better, because that's a run team, right? They are a run-oriented 50 to 60%. I don't blame them. 50 to 60% run team. You've got to be able to find a way to slow that down. And they're hoping that this is the first signing of those types of things. I mentioned him earlier. John Allen did sign today with Minnesota on a 3-year deal for approximately $20 million a year. So he gets about the same amount of money he was going to have here. So they value him at that price. We stopped valuing him at that price. And I'm happy for John. That's a good team. I don't know who their quarterback is right now, but that's a really good team. I'm happy for him. And I hope he has a great, few-year run with Minnesota, whatever happens from here. John is someone that I'm going to look back on and be very proud that he had a really great career in Washington. I think the time was right. We can argue about this. I think the time was right for a change. Whether he wanted it, didn't want it, I don't know. I feel like we had kind of hit this point. They had to make a choice with him contractually. Are you just going to play it out? Nobody wants to do that. Are you going to extend him? Probably not at that price and not at the production level. And for John, I think if he really thinks about it, a fresh start's probably great for him too, to go somewhere where you get that contract that gives you the security, that pays you the amount of money that you want. He's going to a good team. Who knows? Maybe we see them in the playoffs. You never know.
I mean, the other thing with John too, and I don't really hold this against him now, is he did always speak his mind, and he openly had said he considered asking for a trade or, going for a change or whatever. And I'm not trying to knock John on that, but he had let it be known that had, crossed his mind. And I think when that does cross your mind like that, sometimes it is just best for both parties to have a fresh start. And I get it. Like last season was last season and it was magical and he came back and all that. And I almost think he didn't really owe this team to have to rush back, especially in a contract year. And he went ahead and did it anyways. I don't look at John in any kind of ill will whatsoever, but I also think I see this all the time in hockey. Sometimes you just need a change of scenery, both parties, to either get the culture change over, or maybe Minnesota wants a little bit more leadership. I'm completely fine with this. And I'm with you. Like, looking back at John's tenure, he went through a lot of crap in this organization.
Yes, he did.
And I don't want to knock him one bit for that. I think he's a Ring of Fame type player. And I hope he comes back and lives here. He's from here. So yeah, looking back, like I see no ill will towards John, but a change of scenery, I think, was needed for both parties.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was time. And also, listen, he has been a de facto, if not de facto, captain of the team for a while. That shifted last year. Yeah, it really shifted. And I think that's hard sometimes if you're asking someone to extend and not have the same effect on a locker room. And, so I think like that's complicated too. And, I feel like the time was right to make a move. I think for him, I think he's going to see it that way too. But I'm with you. Like, when his career's over, I hope he's welcome back here. Open arms. You're one of us forever. And I'll never forget, you had to wear the shield for a lot of years where there's a lot of bullets hitting it. And like, I will never forget that part of it. Like, I do not envy the leadership players that had to go through what they went through all of those years with all of that change and all of those bad headlines and being asked all these crazy questions about things that had nothing to do with them. And he was at the forefront of it, and he stood up there every week and did it. And sometimes he was really surly about it, but I actually don't blame him a little bit. So to John Allen, I wish you the best up there. Wait, we're playing them this year, right? We have the NFC, or we're playing them this year. So we'll see him this year. I'm excited to see him this year, and I wish him the best with the Minnesota Vikings, unless they play us in a game that matters. So I wish you the best, John. The first, what I would describe of loss for this team is Jeremy Chin. I know they wanted him back. Like, he is one of them. They wanted Zach Ertz back. They wanted Wagner back. They obviously wanted Tress back. They wanted him back. He got what I didn't think was a ton of money from Vegas to go there. Like, it wasn't like some big massive deal. So I was a touch surprised, like, when that happened. And when he didn't re-sign, I went, oh, they have other plans. And I saw Javon Holland's name pop up, and I went, that's where they're going to go. He just signed with the Giants. So we suddenly need a safety now. And that was a bit of a surprise. And I would describe this one as the first one that got away of the offseason.
Yeah, I think what shocked me the most was the price. Like, and it did happen at the same time as the Tunsil trade. So you almost wonder what the communication was there as well, where maybe that this team was heavily involved in those Tunsil talks and we're finalizing that, and they're trying to get a hold of Peters and company. I don't know, but it was really weird to see the Tunsil trade happened, and then literally seconds before or seconds after, the Chin, news comes down too. I'm with you. Like, I was kind of shocked at the price that he got let go for that. Maybe this team thinks, though, they can kind of do the same thing that they did with John Allen, like cut a guy, maybe get the same production a little bit cheaper. I'm not really sure here, but at the same time, too, the safety market is starting to dry up a little bit. I know there's a lot of them, but it is starting to dry up a little bit. So color me concerned, at least with the other safety spot.
I don't know how they feel about Tyler Owens year 2, who was a standout for them and actually looks like Chin, like kind of taller, like has that kind of like physically kind of look very similar. I don't know if they feel like he's ready to do it. I know they like Percy Butler, but he'll be back. But I don't know that he was as physically imposing as Chin was. So this will be an interesting one to see how they go. I'm assuming now they're going to have to find another safety to fill out the roster and compete bare minimum, if not be a starter. I guess they're not swinging for one of the bigger priced ones, but I agree. On the second wave of free agency, I think you're going to see a name pop up and show up in here to play next to Quan Martin. To De'Ami Brown, I want to wish him luck in Jacksonville. He got a 1-year deal. This is what I anticipated would happen. He was going to get a deal that they were uncomfortable with. It's only 1 year, but it's $10 to $12 million. That's a lot of money for a guy whose regular seasons have been at times non-existent. And, a little better last year. I think if he had merged quicker and had played the whole year as the quote unquote number 2, I don't think this would have happened, but he didn't. And Noah Brown was that until he got hurt. And then eventually it turned back around to De'Ami. He was outstanding for them late in the season, made a lot of plays in the playoffs, but that price point to me is too high. So I wish him a lot of luck in Jacksonville. This is what I suspected would happen with him. He would get a contract that they were uncomfortable with, even though it's only 1 year and we don't have a lot of receivers. But I really want to wish him the best too. Here's another guy who just fought to try to get opportunity and all these different changes, all these different quarterbacks, and finally got it. and really made the most of it when it mattered at the end of the year. But that price point for what he's done, I would say there hasn't been consistency with him. That price point's too high for me for his consistency level, but hopefully he takes off in Jacksonville, and I wish him the best down there.
No, for sure. I mean, he's betting on himself here too a little bit. Like he's hoping that Jacksonville gives him a bunch of targets because they did cut Christian Kirk, and maybe he will become a really good target. As far as it goes for Diami, like as we talked about John Allen last segment, Diami was one of those guys that like he survived the Adam Peters, roster turnover from last year. It tells me he was doing everything right, that he bought into what they were doing. Not that I'm saying that there was a doubt of that, but like look at how that roster got turned over. And then, they eventually cut Jamin Davis. They cut Emmanuel Forbes midseason. He survived, and then he ended up rewarding them a little bit by having a really good postseason run. I'm happy for Diami. And look, he takes a 1-year deal to prove that, hey, maybe I can be a little bit more consistent across the board. And hopefully that parlays into a bigger deal next year. I think we're all kind of rooting for him, especially off of the playoffs, because I think we're all going to remember what he did in the playoffs, for those first 2 games. And he had a mistake in the Eagles game, but that happens. But
he
at
had
the
a
same
bad
time,
one in the Eagles game, but yes, right.
At the same time, those first 2 games, they don't win without him, right?
No.
So,
I mean,
I'm going to
that
remember
catch he made with the guy's hand over his face mask in Detroit is one of the ones I'll never forget.
Right.
He really came along for them. I'm happy for him. I wish him the best of luck down there. Also, real quick, Cornelius Lucas did sign with Cleveland today. So here's another, listen, depth on the offensive line was a big deal last year when they started having injuries and they started replacing guys. The production went down and they started relying on guys who were beat up and tried to get through the season. He's a really good swing tackle. I'm sorry to see him leave, but good luck to Luke, big Luke down in Cleveland. I wish we brought him back. So more there are more holes being created here. Releasing John, they had to get Kinlaw to do something about it. Chin's gone. We got to find a safety now. We now no longer have our swing tackle. So there are some things to do here outside of obviously what are the big holes. Let me take a quick break. Brad watch the show. He's at 6:30, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. All right, next up for the Commanders off of what they've done, a huge mega deal to get a left tackle, Laremy Tunsil. Javon Kinlaw, who I would describe as they needed a replacement for John Allen. They got him at a different price point. We'll see if the production will be there. We'll see if there's more to get out of him based on what's been the first 4 or 5 years of his career off of being a first-round pick. And they lost Jeremy Chin. They lost Cornelius Lucas. They lost Diami Brown. They did re-sign Ertz, Wagner, Tressway, etc. They've got a lot of work to do. Edge is going to be interesting. Josh Sweat is off the board. He went to Arizona. I'm glad. That was a price point I wasn't going to be comfortable with paying. Joey Bosa, I guess, is still out there. They've made 2 trades now. I'd be surprised to see another one. I just don't know how serious Cincinnati is about trading Trey Hendrickson. I know they don't want to pay him the Myles Garrett contract. They also seem to want a pick they're not going to get if they are going to let him go. So I don't know what's going to happen there. That's an interesting one. But I don't know where they're going to go, what they're going to do. And that one might be for the draft. That's a possibility.
No, I mean, that's what I'm feeling for this one is I don't really see an answer here, especially with how fast the veterans came off the board yesterday. Like you're mentioning Sweat. I looked at Hassan Reddick got his 1-year deal real fast too. Yeah,
he's not an edge rusher. So he's not an edge setter. He's a pass rusher.
But
he was never one that I thought would be a fit for what we're trying to get here.
But what I was kind of envisioning was if they couldn't get one of the premier ones, you sign 1 to 2 to kind of supplement what's going on. And I liked that idea of that happening. And so but what I'm getting at is how fast the dominoes fell yesterday. There is not a lot out there anymore. As you said, Bosa is out there, but what's the market? We saw Khalil Mack resign with the Chargers. So that was a key one, I think, that the domino didn't fall and kind of caused everyone else to kind of grab whoever they needed to grab, essentially.
The Colts guy who I thought was an interesting option went to the Bears.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, look at that. I mean, by the way, I know we're just talking about signings. The Bears have gone crazy on their offensive and defensive lines, but
I think the Bears have done a great job. I'm going to talk about, I don't think we're going to do a lot of it today because we're just kind of reacting to everything, but during the week, I will go through the teams who I think improve the most. And the Bears really stand out of having had a really, really good start to their offseason.
But yeah, I'm with you too. The big domino to fall here is Cincinnati, and what gives, are they ready to hand out that money? I don't think that they are. What's the price point? And I've kind of joked about this too. I think you can see in front of you what people think of this year's draft. The fact that Adam Peters had to give up a main pick for next year tells you what people think about this year's draft too. Is Cincinnati trying to kick the can down the road here and say, we want next year's picks, not this year's picks? I think maybe that's a legit, gripe that's happening too.
So we suddenly need a safety because Laremy Chin is gone. So let's see what happens there. I don't think it'll be a high-priced one. It's also a position where the market's been a little depressed unless you've turned into like a superstar. Corner is still a need here, so I want to see what they do there because I know they'd like to move Samerstill back to the inside. They're relying on Lattimore on the outside, but they need a third starting corner. So I want to see which direction they go there. Receiver, I still think will be settled and probably in the second wave of free agency. There are still a ton of big names that are still available in free agency, including some of their own. They could re-sign Zacchaeus. They could re-sign Noah Brown. Michael Gallup is coming here to visit. He was obviously played for the Cowboys for a number of years, went to the Raiders, suddenly retired. He's trying to come out of retirement. So I think they know him, Quinn and Witt, because obviously they were in Dallas. I think they're going to kick the tires there a little bit on him and see what that looks like. And considering how much room they have on their roster for receivers, it might be just one of those, just sign him, bring it in here. Let's see how it goes. Non-guaranteed. If it doesn't go well, we'll release him in the summer. If it does go well, great. We know what he can do. We'll bring him up. So we'll have to see. I think receiver is going to get settled mainly in free agency and probably in the second wave. It's the one of these positions I'm least worried about. Edge is interesting. I don't know what direction they're going to go, if they're going to get the right one. It's screaming one of those two picks that they go that direction. I still would like to see them get an explosive running back too. That could happen in the draft as well. All right, let me go through some of the other ones kind of quickly here of what happened around the league. Byron Murphy's back to Minnesota. I got to tell you, the Giants, at least defensively, are kind of sneaky making a couple of moves that are making their defense a lot better. Their secondary has stunk for years. They went and got Paulson Adebo's a very good, underrated name people don't know at corner. And then when we lost Laremy Chin, I was talking on a text chain with people I work with going, I want to get Javon Holland now. I don't know what the price is going to be. I was surprised he ended up there off of a couple of pretty good picks they've had the last couple of years, in the secondary. They suddenly have a very nice young secondary out there with those signings.
No, I think they did exactly what you need to do when you don't have a quarterback. That's invest in your defense, hope to keep some of these games close and sneak out with a win or two with some of these teams. Then you also look in the division, they've got to stop Jaden Daniels. They've got to stop Jalen Hurts. Don't write off that Dallas is going to have a bounce back season, right? I think they've done the right thing. We don't know who their quarterback's going to be, but they're upgrading where they can. You can't really knock what they've done so far.
Yeah. Byron Murphy got a big deal for Minnesota. I'm not surprised. He was the best corner that was available. I want to congratulate Chase Young, who actually got a very nice deal from New Orleans. I really wasn't sure if he was going to be able to play again after his last season in Washington. He underwent neck surgery to try to deal with what ended up being a degenerative issue in his spinal column. And apparently it worked. He had a great year. By the time we played him last year, I remember talking about when we got ready for that Saints game, I'm like, don't be surprised. Chase Young's really come on. He kind of looks like himself. They gave him a nice deal. So congratulations to Chase on getting some money from New Orleans.
No, and I think I said this last year. I hope Chase, for all intents and purposes, has a healthy career and a healthy life. But at the same time, if you can rush the passer, you can turn that into that Jadeveon Clowney type career where you sign 1 year big deals, you make a lot of money in your career. It's not a bad way to live, honestly. So good for Chase for landing that first big deal.
Darius Slayton went back to the Giants. I was a little bit, surprised there because I was just kind of out there. Chris Godwin apparently left a lot of money on the table just to stay with Tampa. So that's too bad that he wasn't available. I had mentioned Michael Gallup is coming to Washington. So some of the better names, or at least the ones that really stood out to me on the list of receivers going into free agency, ended up being a nothing burger. They didn't go anywhere. I believe we're going to bring more receivers in. I just don't know who. And I guess the ones that I would have looked at and wanted, well, they never went anywhere. So you couldn't get them.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And so I'm not surprised a name like Gallup. This is the exact type of name that I thought they were going to have to get in the second wave, essentially. Not surprised that name has popped up and he's visiting.
Kenny Pickett was dealt to the Browns.
Your boy.
Dorian Thompson-Robinson at a pick. He right now would be in line to start for them. Let's see what happens if they draft somebody. Wonder how Myles Garrett feels about that one, that's kind of the direction they went here, that they bring him in. I'm sure Steelers fans are psyched about this because they now get to beat up on him for a couple times a year. So your boy Hands gets to go to Cleveland. The also in Philly, if you're wondering who the backup is, I love this guy, Tanner McKee. So he's their backup, and he kind of emerged that way, which made, I think, Pickett really expendable to them.
No, for your boy Hands. He's not my boy. He's always been your boy Hands. This screams to me that like maybe the Browns aren't going to take a quarterback and then they're just going to take the lumps this year. Like maybe this is what's going to happen. And
they're picking second, so they could take a quarterback if they want.
They could, but at the same time, I feel like you take the best non-quarterback and you roll the dice next year for quarterback. That's just how I feel. I know it's a loser's way of thinking, but I'm just of the ilk of I don't like any of the quarterbacks in this draft to be a franchise quarterback. So maybe that's the route they go.
Are staring down. They just re-signed Myles Garrett, and they could pick Abdul Carter and put him on the opposite side of him.
Yeah.
That's a crazy duo.
Yeah, exactly.
If you did something like that. All right, last thing real quick. I just have to mention these are the quarterbacks. So Seattle traded Geno Smith, and I'm like, you guys better have a plan. What are you guys doing? Well, 1201, like there they were. So tampering has now preceded tampering, obviously. So he goes there, 3-year deal, $100 million. Honestly, for quarterback play, I don't know that they're better with him. I still don't know that I wouldn't still prefer to have Geno if I'm them, but they made their choice. So we'll see how that one works out for them. Justin Fields to the Jets is interesting to me. I think we landed on this yesterday. That's an interesting spot for him. Like they have talent on that team. Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, like they had invested in the offensive line. We'll see how that goes. I don't know that I don't dislike this. And they got a new coach. They gave him just a 2-year deal. There's nobody competing with them at this point. I think this solves for them having to go up and get the number 1 pick. Now they won't. I actually think it's the right move, and I think it's an opportunity for him. It's probably his last opportunity to prove it, but it's an opportunity for him.
On both of these, if I was a Seahawks fan, I'd be crashing out this week because not only did you trade Geno, but you also traded DK. Why are you trading DK when you're signing your quarterback as well? Like that to me, like I'd be freaking out because I'm going, okay, if you're gonna hit the reset button, fine, all aboard. But then you go and pay $100 million for Darnold. I don't know what you're doing there. Anyways, for Fields too, I think I mentioned this to you yesterday. They really like Tyrod Taylor in that locker room too. So I bet you they're just going to let both of them compete. And then even if Fields doesn't get the job outright, I bet you like he starts eventually or whatever. I'm with you. I don't know what the Jets were going to do to fix that position, but I'm all right with this one. Like roll the dice on Fields. I don't think you really got a fair shake in Pittsburgh either. So we'll see.
All right, let me take a quick break. Brave West Show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, just a couple minutes on the Capitals, who made a decision today, which I really like that they did. I've actually been yelling for this for a long time, that, especially like when the playoffs roll around too, this is a problem, and it could happen again this year. All the games end up on national television. The locals don't get to call the games any longer. And, if the Caps were to win the Stanley Cup again, I really would like to hear Joe B and hopefully Lockers call on all that. They've at least preemptively decided, because Ovi's probably going to break the record this year, and all the Caps games are getting yanked by all the national chains because they want to be there when it happens and call it, that the Monumental announced they're going to let Joe B and hopefully Locker at that point, or Alan May, whoever it may be, to call them. And then they will release those calls for archival purposes. This is something that's been, to me, a long time coming that I'll never forget. I went to Vegas to see the Caps in the Stanley Cup final, and Joe B was sitting next to me and not in the booth. And it just didn't feel right that was happening. So I'm really glad that the Caps decided to do this. I think it's a really smart thing to do.
Yeah, and I first saw the Washington Post story on it, and then I saw Zach Leonsis basically tweet out, and I'm glad that this went through the league. He said that the Caps and the NHL came to an agreement that for archival purposes, they're going to let them call the games, and mainly it's for social media and for their own archives. Yes. And look, This is a unique situation. So I'm glad the NHL bent on this one. I'm with you. Like, it sucks when the national games happens, but you and I know this happens. And like, this is the beauty of local radio, right? This is why my friend John Walton, you get to hear every game. You with the Commanders, same thing. Like, you're always going to hear a local call, right?
We go to the Super Bowl, I get to call it.
Right. And same thing with John. Like, I was the producer of the Stanley Cup, the whole entire run. Like, that's where you're undefeated. But when it comes to TV, it's a lot more eyeballs. It's a lot more ears, whatever. But the league steps in on these big games. I'm happy to see, though, because this was such a unique circumstance and it is the regular season, they bent and said, you know what, this is okay. Because I understand it with the postseason. It happens. But for them to actually kind of acknowledge and go, you know what, we will let you guys call those. You can release them whenever you do. A++. I'm glad they agreed to something like this.
More is more. I hope it opens the door for let the local guys call the playoffs too for archival purposes. Like, but like, we're not going to do a stream. You're not going to be able to see it live. It's only going to be seen after the fact. But I'd love to hear Joe B and Locker call them holding up the Stanley Cup. Like, I think so. Hopefully it opens the door for something like that too. And I'm glad the league agreed to this. And it's a smart move for all of them. Real quick, they start a West Coast trip to the Capitals tonight against the Ducks. What do you got tonight?
Probably should be an easy win tonight for the Caps. I've liked their third period. The last two games between the Red Wings and the Seahawks, or not the Seahawks, the Kraken. I have NFL on the brain, but it should be an easy 2 points in my opinion. I think this whole West Coast trip should be at least 4 out of a possible 6 points. Spencer Carberry even mentioned what I mentioned, that he's excited to just get these guys out of DC for a week so they can kind of hit the reset, the recalibration button. I anticipate a pretty good win tonight. Give me like a 4-2, 3-1 type situation tonight.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Let's see what we do tomorrow, guys. We'll talk to you then. Very much the show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.